Hi everybody, Carmen here, and for this week's How Do I, we are going to learn how do I baste a quilt. A few weeks ago, I did a presentation on different techniques for quilting. And when we're talking about quilting, we're talking about when you take your top layer of your quilt and your back layer of your quilt and your batting, and you sandwich them all together, and then you are going to do your quilting. For a lot of us, we love to piece, and I speak from my own personal experience. I love taking all those colors. I love getting my beautiful quilt pieced, and then sometimes I get hung up on the actual quilting part because I'm a little nervous. Is it gonna be great? You know, all of those sorts of things. And so we have a great How Do I where I went over lots of different simple techniques for doing quilting. And one of the things I just briefly spoke about was basting, and we had a few questions, so I thought I would do a whole presentation on different techniques for basting because there are more tools out there than there used to be for basting your quilt, and there's a couple of different theories about basting. So we will just sort of get started. You can see here I have a faux quilt top here that is ready. This is actually just a panel, but it looks like a quilt, which is sort of great, and it'll give you some sort of good ideas. And then I have some extra fabric, and then I have some of my tools here. So traditionally, the way that we basted quilts, at least way back when, like 25 years ago when I started quilting, was we would use safety pins. Okay, so the first thing, if you're going to get your 3 layers together, right, if you have a top and a back and a bottom, you're going to want, generally you want your bottom to be, the backing to be bigger than your top, and you would want the batting to be bigger than your top. And you're going to get all of those things sort of layered together. You would want to iron them, right? So like you can see I have some creases here on this fabric, and if I was really going to be quilting this, I would want it totally iron flat, because as you might imagine, if you have any puckers or anything, that's going to actually pucker into your quilt, okay? And then so you would take your batting, your back, your batting, and your top, and you put your top on top, and you really would want it so actually your top is smaller than your batting, and I always want to leave a couple of inches. Something like this is what I would actually want to leave all the way. I don't know if you can see here. Let's pull this away so you can see a little bit better. But I would want to leave this kind of space, maybe even more depending on how large my quilt is. I would want to leave that all the way around there, and this way, if my top shifts and everything, at the end I can square it up, okay? So that's the first thing. You want to make sure that your layers are together. You want to make sure you have enough batting and enough backing that is larger than your actual quilt, and you want to make sure that everything is ironed and smooth, because if you have any big puckers, even if it feels like sort of small, sometimes those things, you know, as you're quilting it, it can fold into itself. Like literally, you guys, if you could do it wrong, I've done it. And I don't know about you, but even though I use my seam ripper all the time, who likes a seam rip? I mean, nobody, right? So that's what we're trying to avoid. So once you have your quilt top sort of put together like this, there are a couple of different ways to actually baste it, okay? So the one that we have used for years, you can see I have a little stack of things, is the safety pin. Safety pins have been around for forever. This is a curved safety pin. So if you're going to use safety pins, you're going to want to use a curved one. I don't know if there's a way for them to see it. Maybe if we go here. I don't know if you can see how curved it is, but this is a curved safety pin. So it's not like a straight safety pin. So if you're going to use a safety pin, you do want to use a curved safety pin because it's much easier to get into the quilt, because then what we're going to do is you would always want to start in the center of your quilt. And that's because what we're trying to do is hold the quilt together so that way as you're quilting it, it's not shifting too much and you don't get fabric that rolls in, or you don't get any of those puckers. So you're going to start in the center of your quilt, and you would just use a safety pin like this, and then you have to hook it here like this, and you would, about a fist apart, just keep putting safety pins in, right, to baste your quilt. Now, sometimes when you're quilting, like if this was my actual quilt and I knew that I was going to put quilting into each of these blocks, then I might do something where, since I know how I'm going to quilt it, I'm going to baste into my 4 corners here, right? Does that make sense? So some part of your basting is going to be connected to how you're going to actually quilt it. You don't want to put pins in the spot that you want to be sewing on. You want the pins to be holding it, okay? So that is how you use safety pins. But what I like a little better than safety pins are these guys called Wonder Clips. Okay, and Wonder Clips, I think I've put it here, you can see it. There's the Wonder Clips there. And Wonder Clips are pretty slick. They are by Clover, and instead of it being a traditional pin, a traditional safety pin, you can see it has like a little fatter shape here, so when I just push it down, it can hook in. So it's a lot easier to pin. So if we go here and pin some of these guys in, these guys are just a lot easier on our fingers. Because what happens with a traditional safety pin is if you have a big old quilt, you just start, you know, your fingers get tired after a while. Does that make sense? You're like pinning and pinning and pinning, and imagine if this is a king-size quilt, your fingers really can get a little bit tired, and I don't know about you, but I poke myself sometimes. So these Wonder pins are way nicer because you can just put it in and snap it down, and it's a lot easier on your fingers. Okay, so those are the techniques for pinning, and if we were really going to do this, of course, we would just go all over the whole quilt top, no matter how large your quilt is, right? You're going to go over the whole thing about a fist apart and make sure that it is held down, okay? So this is one, so pinning is probably the more traditional method that we have used for, I don't know, that was originally how I learned to put my quilts together, okay? So there's two other ways to do it that I actually prefer, and that would be to use some sort of adhesive to hold my quilt together, okay? So there's a couple of different types of adhesives out there. One that has been around for a pretty long time is something like this 505. This is a spray adhesive, and I'm not going to actually spray it inside my studio room here because it is sort of messy, but basically what you would do is you would pull your quilt back, you would spray, and then you would flip it over here and you would push it away from the center and out, if that makes sense. And you would do that for the top, and then you would do it for the back. So if you're spraying, what you would do is you wouldn't probably put your back on right away. You would pick your top or your bottom, and you would have just your batting out, and then you would get your top situated on there, flip it over, spray, flip it back down, push it, and do it in segments, working from the center out, and that can hold your quilt together, okay? And these are temporary spray adhesives. So there's this one, there's also KK2000. Those are the two, this one is by Odif, it's called 505. Those are the two that are probably used the most. These spray adhesives are also great when you're doing embroidery. Now I still do use them for embroidery, but I find for quilting, my absolute favorite is the Freefuse, okay? This is by Quilter Select. If you're not familiar with Quilter Select, Alex Anderson created the Quilter Select line of quilting tools. So they have a ton of amazing quilting tools. Freefuse is one of them. They also make a whole line of mats. Like I brought this one out so you guys could see it. This is a new poppy cotton. They have a whole bunch of poppy cotton special edition. Look at this, how cool this is. On the back, it has this beautiful flower. And so what's fun about this new mat is it has a project side, right? Which, you know, the thing I didn't mention is the reason why I have this mat here is because if I'm going to be using pins, I want to have a surface underneath my quilt that if my pin like hits the table, right, it's not any big deal. And so that's why I have a mat underneath here. But this one is pretty fun because it has a project side, and then this would be the cutting side, and it's bright pink, and then they have a line of new poppy cotton pink rulers. So Quilter Select just makes a whole bunch of fun stuff. They also make a great rotary cutter, ruler, a great system. And the reason why I think these products are so great is because Alex Anderson has been quilting for years, and she has helped design them. So let's talk about Freefuse. So Freefuse comes in this little shaker jar here, and it comes inside the jar is a packet like this, and so you open the packet up and you pour it in here, and then it has a little like salt shaker is what I call it here. And the way that this guy works, which is super slick, is you would just open your quilt up here. You're just going to sprinkle, it's salting. We are not, this is not like, I don't know, something like, it's not a ton. You're just salting it on there, and then you would take it over to your iron, and then you are going to iron it down, okay? And what's beautiful about this is it doesn't leave texture in your quilt, and it just holds your quilt together really, really nicely. Super easy to use. You don't feel it. It doesn't add any texture, and it's not messy. So where spray adhesive is lovely, it works, but as you imagine when you spray it, it sort of sprays, right? It goes all over the place. And so when I used to use spray adhesives, before there was Freefuse, I would often try to do it outside, right? You want to be somewhere where it's nicely ventilated. You want to be somewhere where you don't mind something gets sticky. When this is why Freefuse is so awesome. And then when you use this up, all you do is you buy a little refill packet and put it in here. And it amazes me how long this actually lasts because you don't have to, once again, you're not like pouring it on, you're salting it, right? So you actually use less than you would think, and it washes beautifully, and then it just irons in here. The other product I have here is a wool pressing mat, which I do love wool pressing mats. They're great for ironing. This one is a new larger one that could fit on your ironing board or on your table here, and it actually has markings, which is pretty cool. There is one that's also the size of your ironing board. So there's a couple of really cool wool pressing pads are amazing for embroidery. They're really nice when next to my machine, I always have one so I can turn and press really easily. And in this case, it was a really lovely thing if you have something that's a larger, right? And you want to press on, there's some new nice large wool pressing mats, and they are great for embroidery if you need to embroider your, if you need to iron your embroidery, because you can flip it over and it's awesome. Okay, so Freefuse is probably my favorite method because then you would just sprinkle it all the way around. And once again, it would be a lot like how we talked about doing it for the spray adhesive, where you're going to pull your quilt over, shake some on here, iron it, and then move to the next section. And you always want to be working from the middle out, so that way everything is pushed out and flat. And I would probably do the top first, and then I would do the bottom. Just because I want to make sure that my bottom lines up with my top, of course. Those are the different ways that you can baste. So you can use traditional safety pins, you can use the Wonder pins, you could use spray adhesive, or you could use the Freefuse. Lots of great different options. And of course, the size of your quilt might help you decide which one of those options is going to be best for you. But I always recommend with all of these things, give them a try, see what works for you, because the most important thing is that you pick a basting method that makes sense to you and that works well for your project. So if you have any questions, let us know. We always answer them even when we are not live. And I do know coming up here to finish our quilting series, we are going to have a how do I on how do I do binding. So look for that. And of course, if you ever have things that you want us to do how do I's on, let us know because we're always looking for more ideas. Happy quilting, happy sewing. See you next time.